And I believe we are live now.
And I believe we are live now.
A pleasant good evening, everyone, and welcome to
A pleasant good evening, everyone, and welcome to Caribbean Life series. Response to the CAPRI report. My name is Sarah Buckland. I'm a doctoral student in geography and founder of Chosen to Glow Ministries, Jamaica. And I will be your host for today. Mr. Leslie Joseph Buckland Jr. is my co-host, and he is a minister of religion. This series is designed to continue dialogue on the topic of abortion and address some very questionable assertions made in the CAPRI report. To help in this discussion, we have quite an intriguing lineup for you today as we discuss the social and economic aspects of the abortion issue with experts from around the world. We are pleased to have with us live a researcher, civil engineer, and director of education and research at Human Life International. We also have with us a surprise guest today, Dr. Callum Miller, medical doctor and bioethicist at Oxford University, Center of Christian Apologetics. Thank you for joining us for this very important discussion today. Dr. Alveda King, niece of civil rights activist Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., notified us she'll be joining us later in the discussion. But our other esteemed presenter, Ms. Alison Centafonte, External Affairs Director at Live Action, could not join us live this evening, but you will hear her pre-recorded contributions later in this session.
Within our midst, we also have Ms. Crystal Tomlinson, President of the People's National Party Youth Organization, and Ms. Jameek Burrell, Deputy General Secretary for Institutional Chapters.
Dr.
Brooks Clappin, my colleague and team leader from the Love March movement, is also with us, and she will be our social media coordinator for today.
A warm welcome to all our listeners on our social media pages at Chosen to Glow Ministries, Facebook, and YouTube channel. Thank you all for joining us. Before we get into the discussion, let us go into prayer. Blessed are you, O Lord God, the creator of the heavens and the earth and the seas and all that is in them, who is the giver of life. We give you thanks, O Lord, for the life you have created, the beautiful vegetation, the flying creatures, the water creatures, the land creatures, and especially human beings who are made in the image and likeness of God. As we go through this webinar, we pray that you will open our understanding, that we may see your point of view concerning the value of every human life, not only those who are born, but those that are unborn, and may help us that we will humbly accept your point of view as the real, objective, factual point of view, and allow ourselves to be guided by it. In Jesus' name, amen and amen.
We want to remind you, our viewers, also how to participate in the discussion, because this really was made with you in mind. These sessions are meant to facilitate dialogue, even if you are of a different point of view. And so, and we also ask that you do this in a respectful manner. You can use the hashtag CaribLife CARIBFORLIFE, on the Chosen to Glow YouTube channel and Facebook page to post your questions to our speakers. We also invite you to visit our Facebook page and participate in our poll. So we have a lot of ground to cover, so let us get right into the discussion. We were experiencing a few technical difficulties before. We're trying to actually open a video, but in lieu of that, let us start speaking about the topic of reducing social ills and the protection of women, which were two of the primary reasons given in the CAPRI report for the recommendation of legalizing abortion. Because legalizing abortion really protects vulnerable women and lessen social ills, such as sexual abuse, or does it increase discrimination? So I'd like to actually hear from our panelists and especially our political representative first, just hear what their views are on the CAPRI report before we get into the presentation by our speakers. There were some complaints about the audio quality. Is it continuing? Echoing?
Yes, we can still hear the
Can I get
echo.
some feedback, please? Okay, let me just try.
Mic check again. Is this better?
Mic check again. Can anyone hear me better? Is the echo still?
Yes, there's still an echo. Can we just mute mics if we're not directly speaking to the audience?
All right, we sincerely apologize to our audience about the technical difficulties that we are actually experiencing. All right, just to save on time, I think what we will do is just to bypass the video sections and invite Dr. Clowes to make his presentation. I don't think it's a video format. It will be screen sharing. Is that right, Dr. Clowes?
I've got a PowerPoint presentation. How do I put that up?
Okay, so I'm gonna try and enable screen sharing for you. I'm gonna stop my share and let us start with your topic. Your topic is on the economic costs of abortion.
All right. Can you see the PowerPoint presentation?
No, I can't see it yet. I'm trying to stop my share and then I will let you know.
Okay, just say when.
Yes, yes, yes. I'm working on it. Unfortunately, my computer chose to not respond very well today.
Oh,
But yeah,
well, that's the rule. The more important the presentation, the more it's going to seize up on you.
that's what I realized. But yeah. I've stopped the share. Dr. Clowes, are you able to share? Can you try?
I'll try here. It says, I cannot start the screen share while the other participant is still sharing.
Okay. All right. Apparently, there's a delay.
Okay, I can go without the PowerPoint presentation if that's necessary. I'll try a couple more times here.
Or you can try again, please.
Okay, here we go.
Great, great.
Can you see that?
Not yet. Something. Yes, it's coming up.
All right, it should be on the screen now.
Yes, I can see it.
Oh, good. All right, well, the topic of my presentation today, it should only be about 15 to 20 minutes, is on the demographics of the situation in Jamaica. I call it Jamaica's choice between life and death, because it's very literally true of exactly what's happening in the country today. A little bit about myself. I'm here with some little girls in the interior of Papua New Guinea. I've been around the world doing this kind of thing. I have 41 years of experience in demographics and population issues. I have a doctorate in statistical analysis, system science, which is statistics on steroids, most advanced statistical analysis methods available today. I've traveled a couple of million miles to 70 different countries around the world, and my love is opposition research. So looking at the CAPRI report was exactly my cup of tea. I love that kind of thing. And I found some very interesting things out. So let's take a look at the situation demographically in Jamaica today and over the last several decades. 5.8 children per woman. It used to be the standard in Jamaica in 1960. That's a fairly average in the world at that time, nearly 6 children per family. Now today we find in 2021, this has dropped by 2/3. And replacement fertility, that red line there, is 2.1. Means every woman who has children should have 2.1 children. And if you neglect immigration and immigration and built a fence around Jamaica, you would soon see the population begin to slide. Now, the problem with this is the point of no return is 1.4 children per family. And Jamaica will reach that even without the addition of abortion to the criminal law or the decriminalization of abortion. And so by the end of the century, if Jamaica dips under 1.4 children per family, there's no coming back. No country has ever survived going that low in replacement and below replacement fertility. And there are hundreds of examples throughout history. Not one country has ever returned from the grave after dipping that low. If you can understand that if abortion is legalized, always the number of abortions increases tremendously. So you'll see Jamaica hit the point of no return, either 2060 or slightly after. And at that point, there's no coming back for the country. We look at the total population in Jamaica today, you see the curve there. Today in 2021 is about 2.9 million, and soon it'll hit a peak of 2035, and then it will start to decline down to about the 1970 value by the end of 2100. Once again, you'll see if abortion is legalized that this curve will sharply bend downward, and you see a much smaller population, perhaps 1 million or less by the end of the century. Now we get into the very interesting stuff about the median age of people in Jamaica. That's the number where you have an equal number of people younger and older. In 1970, believe it or not, according to the United Nations, the average or the median age in Jamaica was 17.2 years. So the average person in Jamaica would be a teenager. Now we have just about perfection. This is where you have the healthiest and most productive population at about 30 to 35 years old. And that's a situation in 2021 in the country of Jamaica today. By the end of the century, if abortion is not legalized, you'll see an average island population or median island population, which has an average age of 69 years old. So a lot of Jamaicans are going to be older than the tourists that come to visit there by the end of the century. If abortion is legalized, you'll see something in the age, in the range of 65 years by the end of the century in median population age. So what does abortion have to do with all of this? It has a very large impact on the demographics of every country in the world. So let's take a look at Jamaica and the United States by comparison. You can see the numbers there, the women of childbearing age in 2020. In Jamaica, about 688,000. United States, 65.3 million. Now, according to the CAPRI report, there are about 22,000 abortions every year in Jamaica. In the United States, there are 850,000. Now, why is this important? Because if you look at the abortion rates in the two countries, you'll see that if we accept the alleged figure of 22,000 as truth, you'll have a 3 times higher abortion rate in Jamaica than you do in the United States. And this immediately tells you that something's not right. They'd have us believe that the abortion rate in Jamaica, where it's illegal, is 3 times higher than the abortion rate in the United States, where it has been legal for more than 50 years in some states starting in 1967. So this immediately clues you in that something's not right with this report. Now, I've been all around the world and people have told me, and I've read in United Nations documents, and we see that in every country of the world where they're trying to legalize abortion, the pro-abortion people, the pro-choice people always lie about the number of abortions, they greatly exaggerate them, and also the number of women who die of illegal abortion every year. This started back in 1916 with Russia, and this is before penicillin became widely available or was even invented. They claimed 600,000 women died every year of abortion when the actual number was 1,800, the same in India. Brazil, they claimed before it was partially legalized, 400,000 abortion deaths a year, when the actual number, according to IBGE, their demographic institute, was 241. You can see the numbers for yourself. In Trinidad and Tobago, when I was there the last time, during a talk, a medical doctor quoted a number of 350 women dying every year. So I asked him right out, how did you come up with that number? And he said, well, we had a woman die a couple of months ago in one of our hospitals. So he just took that number 1, multiplied it by 50, approximately 50 weeks in the year, times 7 hospitals, and came up with 350 women dying. Now, this is absolutely garbage. That's not the way you do statistics. You do a careful study to find out exactly what the impact of abortion really is. And the latest number they've quoted in the world is 70,000 deaths, when the actual number is around 2,640 deaths. Now, it's important to realize here that there are 55 million legal and illegal abortions every year in the world. And if you could snap your fingers and make abortion completely legal all over the world for any reason through all 9 months of pregnancy, you wouldn't get much lower than 2,690 women dying of even legal abortion. So it wouldn't make much difference, because in most countries of the world, whether it's legal or not, it's freely available. So where do their numbers come from when they start talking about the number of illegal abortions and the number of women injured and the number of women killed? Hospital statistics. Well, in all the cases when I've gone into investigative mode on these people, they don't really have any agglomerated hospital statistics. People just don't do that. Vague global estimates of abortion complication rates. This is a problem with the United Nations. They just make estimates based upon several wrong assumptions and come up, let's say, with a number of 22,000 abortions every year in Jamaica. Personal experience. Now, this is my personal favorite thing to investigate. All over the world and in the United States too, I've heard stories of these doctors who have wept as dying women were in their arms and they passed away. And then you start asking them questions about this. Where's the death report? Where's the death report? You know, where's the information on this? Where are the press releases? And they simply refuse to give you any information because they always turn out to be lies. Often they will insult you and claim that their sources are confidential. We want to protect the sources. We want to protect women's privacy. This is a certain sign that they're lying. So the advice I have for you here is if they quote you 22,000 abortions a year in Jamaica, say exactly where did these numbers come from? They'll say the United Nations. Where did their numbers come from? You'll find out that the research is shoddy at best, especially when it comes to women dying and women being injured by abortions. As they will tell you themselves, it's a very simple operation. And it's not going to produce quite as many injuries and deaths as they claim. You can't set national policy on secrets. You have to get to the very bottom of these numbers. You have to have a solid number before discussion can even begin. So what you have to do is very closely question the pro-abortion people, the people who are pushing for abortion to be legalized. And what you have to do is say, we want solid documentation, not estimates. You can't set national policy on vague numbers and on secrets. Now, here's an example in the United States, which applies all over the world, not just the US, but all over Africa in particular. They will give you the hard cases of abortion. In the United States, we had a pro-abortion movie that said typical abortion cases are the 44-year-old mother who already has 9 children. She has uterine cancer. She's going to die if she has a child. An 11-year-old incest victim who's pregnant. The older mother carrying a baby with anencephaly or a lack of the covering of the skull who will die shortly after birth anyway, and the poor Black woman who's on public assistance. So let's take a look at the real reason that women have abortions. And this is by the Alan Guttmacher Institute, which is a pro-abortion organization. It used to be part of Planned Parenthood. And they interviewed women all over the world. So this is not just the American experience. This is the Latin American, Eurasian, African, European experience, all agglomerated, all brought together. I can't afford a baby now. 21% of the women say this. I don't want the responsibility, another 1 out of 5. A baby would change my life. I have problems with my relationship. I'm not mature enough to have a baby. In other words, babies having babies. But apparently it's okay with the pro-choice people if babies are killing babies. I have enough children. I want to keep my pregnancy secret. Now, the hard cases, I was coerced into having an abortion is 1%. Eugenics, the baby has a birth defect. I was raped 1%, and the pregnancy threatens my life or health. So 94% of abortions around the world are done for social reasons, not the difficult cases of rape and incest, fetal deformity, mother's health or life. We have to keep that in mind. So when they talk about all these hard cases, make sure that you point out that these are relatively rare. In the United States, which is fairly typical around the world as well, the abortionists had to report the reason for nearly 1.4 million abortions, and you see exactly the same thing. This backs up the previous slide. The mother's life or physical health, 1.3%, mental health, 1.6%, rape and incest, about 1 out of 600, eugenics, 0.65%, or the hard cases, about 3.7%, which means lifestyle or social abortions, 96.3%. And I'm sure this is going to be exactly the same in Jamaica because it's the same in Trinidad and Tobago. It's the same in Puerto Rico, Cuba, and all over Latin America. So even from 2,000 miles away in Front Royal, I really wish I could be with you today because Jamaica is such a beautiful place. I've been there 5 times. The people are absolutely wonderful. But now I have to sit here in my office at Human Life International and look at what's happening from 2,000 miles away. We see a lot of propaganda beginning in the media, which is the way it always begins. Partnership for Women's Health and Well-Being said, the practice of unsafe abortions and the consequences of abortions performed by untrained non-specialist physicians can result in a number of complications, including severe infections, gangrene, hemorrhaging, tearing of the cervix, uterine perforation, laceration of the vaginal wall, and untimely death. Now, it sounds like these folks are extremely concerned about what's happening to women in Jamaica. So are they concerned enough to shut down the illegal abortionists? According to a 2019 Jamaica Observer article, this abortion practice thrives quietly and peacefully in small doctors' offices and homes across the island. And this shows that everyone knows where the abortionists are practicing, so there wouldn't be any problem going after them. Now, these pro-choice people proclaim so loudly that they care so much about the lives and health of women. Why go through the extremely complicated process of legalizing abortion when you could just shut down the illegal abortionists? It's obvious because they don't care that much about women, only about the availability of abortion. If there are butchers and incompetents out there, why aren't they arrested by the government? This is the question you have to ask. And when you read the comments in the newspapers, pro-abortion people say, I don't want to bring somebody into such a violent society, so let's kill them, essentially. You know, I don't want to have my baby grow up in a violent society, so I'm going to kill my baby now. This doesn't make any sense. These progressives, the pro-abortion people, always try the easier wrong instead of the harder right. We have our problems in the United States just like you do. In Jamaica, though, you have to prosecute the abortionists, the molesters and the rapists, and teach morality in the schools again. This would not only go a long way towards solving the problem of women dying and being mutilated by illegal abortions, it would go a long way towards solving many of the other problems in society as well, single motherhood, crime, and poverty. In other words, things have gotten so ragged, both in Jamaica and the United States, that we have to go back and we have to start rebuilding the foundations. A very difficult job, but that will help to solve these problems. So let's take a look at CAPRI's report, Coming to Terms, the Social Costs of Unequal Access to Safe Abortions. Now, as soon as I saw the cover of this report, I knew that something was off. It is funded by, or co-funded primarily by the European Union, which operates out of Brussels, Belgium. And what's also interesting is that CAPRI itself is funded by a Canadian organization called the International Development Research Center. CAPRI was founded and is funded by the International Development Research Center out of Ottawa, Canada, a $250 million a year organization. Now, we have seen all around the world that this is how the rich nations operate. They want to suppress the population of Jamaica. So they don't have a bunch of white people come into Jamaica and say, okay, people, start having babies, because you'll consider them to be obviously imperialist, racists, which is true. So instead, they found an allegedly Jamaican organization called CAPRI, and they hire photogenic, probably media people to head it up, and they start pushing the anti-life agenda. Now, this has happened in countries all over the world, and we have exposed this kind of skullduggery in at least 20 different countries all over the developing world. So what you have here is CAPRI is not a Jamaican organization. It's a Canadian organization that's staffed by Jamaicans who are highly paid to preach the anti-natalist position. Now take a look at this interesting report, Full Funding of All Abortions. Now this is where it starts breaking down, and I love going to reports like this because they tell you 72 pages of statistics, which most are true, of course, but they don't tell you the proper conclusion. They say that if we legalize abortion, we will save $1.4 million in US dollars every year in annual medical costs caused by botched abortions. But this is less expensive than the economic loss of only 3 abortions. They use disability life years. They say that these women will be disabled for short periods of time, sometimes long periods of times, by the effects of illegal abortions, and the cost will come up to $1.4 million US every year. But I did the calculations and found out that every time a woman has an abortion, you will lose 45 years of productivity, which adds up to nearly $500,000 in lost revenue for the government, taxes, and economic benefits from every person who's aborted. So imagine the tremendous impact to Jamaica of 22,000 aborted babies every single year. This is typical of the short-sighted pro-abortion people. The second thing is they want reproductive and sexual health for adolescents. Now, what they don't tell you is they go by the World Health Organization of an adolescent, which is 10 to 19 years old. So girls as young as 10 years old could get contraception and abortion without their parents' knowledge or consent. Now, this is an absolute gift for molesters and sex traffickers everywhere. In the United States, there have been hundreds of cases of abortion clinics who have a man bring in a young lady who could be anywhere from 10 to 12 years old, even younger sometimes, and the abortion clinics never ask any questions. They just abort the young girl and send her back to her molester. So this is what the child molesters want to happen. They want to be able to cover up the evidence of their crimes. And finally, most aggravating, they want a secret vote for abortion in the parliament. And you can find all this on page 23, because of fear of backlash. Well, of course there's going to be a backlash. That's a democratic process. They want it to be secret because they don't want the people's voice to be heard. It's all right to know what's going on in our governments, and these people want to cover it all up and have it all happen in secrets. Now let's take a look at something they talk about all the time. Does abortion reduce crime? Well, obviously, on the face of it, it does. The more people you kill, the less crime you're going to have. But in the United States, we find, interestingly, a movement called Fight Crime, Abort Black Babies. This is by the groups Stormfront and Tightrope, white supremacist groups. In the United States, the liberals have turned everything completely upside down. The people who try to save Black babies are the racists, and the people who are promoting it are not the racist. But back in 1922, the white race became aware of the idea that even in 1922, we weren't replacing our population. So you can find this book online. It's Lothrop Stoddard's The Rising Tide of Color Against White World Supremacy. And in that, he talks about how the Black nations are going to eventually overcome North America and the European nations because they have too many babies. So the idea that we can fight crime by aborting Black babies is the most nakedly racist idea there is, because you're going to assume that all the bad things are being done by Black people. And this was carried on by the Quarterly Journal of Economics, John Donahue and Stephen D. Levy, the impact of legalized abortion on crime. And they said legalized abortion has contributed for as much as 50% of the recent drop in violent crime. And if you really don't look at the issue very closely, that seems to be true. 18 years after Roe v. Wade of the legalization of abortion in the United States, violent crime peaked and then started to go down tremendously. But the number one rule of a valid study, you have to be able to replicate it, to duplicate it. If it works in one place, it has to work everywhere else in order to be valid. If the results of the study are not repeated, it's just a coincidence. And these two men cannot replicate the study in other countries. Canada and Great Britain and Germany and France did not experience a drop in crime after abortion legalization. So this was due to other reasons. Why did the USA's violent crime start to decrease in 1995? Because in 1976, the death penalty, which is a great deterrent, was reinstituted. Increased rates of arrests. broken windows policing, which means you go after minor crime to stop people from committing major crime. Longer prison sentences, increased concealed carry laws so people could protect themselves, a stronger economy, perhaps most importantly, the waning of the crack epidemic, affirmative action policies, more minorities in police departments, and increase in the number of police officers in high crime cities. So these two study managers did not get their conclusions correctly. Sure, well, they got the conclusion correctly because the number of crimes were decreasing, but the reasons were not correct. It wasn't because of the legalization of abortion. So even if abortion did reduce crime in one segment of the population by reducing it, it's a hugely immoral way to go about achieving the objective. You don't kill somebody because you might be a future criminal. If we did that, then we'd kill all of the high crime people in the United States. Do we attack the actual cause of crime, which is economic, or do we attack the next generation of Jamaicans in the womb? So that kind of settles that. In conclusion, I'd like to say some of the things I'd like to offer for the people there. This PowerPoint presentation, if you email me, I'll show you my email address in the next slide. A presentation on the racism of abortion and how the population controllers work. A presentation on the connection between abortion and crime. I have over 100 PowerPoint presentations on many different topics like this. And also you see on the right, a pro-life pastoral handbook, which answers the 40 fundamental questions on abortion, on birth control, on population control, homosexuality, transgenderism, and so on. Questions like, does contraception really cause a reduction in abortion? What about abortion for rape or incest or to preserve the life of the mother, and so on? So if you want any of these resources, or if you'd like to just talk to me about them, please email me at bclowes@hli.org. And I'd like to thank everybody for listening. It's an honor for me to be here at this presentation. One thing that could be better is I wish I could be there in person. So thank you, and God bless all of you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Clowes. I have a question to ask.
Hi.
We are in the month for Black History Month commemorations, but as you mentioned about abortion and welfare and racism, I think most don't see the link with the slavery mentality. When CAPRI says that doing away with a growing child in the womb would help the economy, and they cite tax dollars spent to care for that child, the question is, Dr. Clowes, are we reducing our babies to economic commodities that we can do away with at our convenience based on our own profit?
It seems to be, and we have people in the United States doing that too. It seems to be a plague of the Caribbean, the so-called developed world, and many other countries. I'm impressed by Africa because they don't see things in terms. I've been to Africa more than 40 times now, to many different countries. They're not impressed by the economic argument. And they'll show you a little baby and say, this baby may grow up to be rich. This baby may grow up to be poor. It may grow up to be a criminal or a doctor or an attorney, something like that. But it's the baby's right to choose all of this, and it's God's right to have this baby in this world today. We don't see the terrible violation of God's rights in this kind of thing, because the God wills that this baby should be in the womb, and who are we to kill that baby? But the economic argument goes back to eugenics or the perfection of the human race. We're groping for a utopia here, and there is no utopia on this world. At least there hasn't been since Adam and Eve were kicked out of the garden. So an economic argument is not only fruitless, as I've shown, but it's heartless as well.
Okay, another point is this. In Jamaica, we already have a big problem with devaluing life. Just last month, there was a horrendous murder inside a church where a woman was shot because of a family feud over land. Thinking of abortion because of economic reasons Does this contribute further to a decline in the perceived value of life in society?
Well, I think that can be proven, sir, because in the United States, first we legalize abortion for the hard cases I talked about, and then the people get used to that, and then we legalize abortion for all different reasons, and people got used to that. And now in countries like the United States, Canada, Netherlands, Belgium, we shouldn't let this newborn baby suffer because they're born with a serious defect. So let's let this baby die. And we've seen in our Senate in the United States, the Senate Democrats have 11 times voted down a bill to save babies who are aborted alive. Let's say you have a baby who's at term and is aborted alive, and the mother doesn't want that baby. You're allowed to kill the baby by letting it starve to death. And the Democrats won't come out against that. And I'm worried because we're going step by step here. Each step coarsens the sensibility of the society, and we go on more and more. This is how Nazi Germany started. They didn't start with the Jews. They didn't start with the priests or the ministers. They started with the handicapped children. And when the people didn't object, then they just expanded it. And as you know, as a man of God yourself, that the primary characteristic of evil is that once you let just a little bit in, it always expands. The devil is always knocking on the door. And if you dare to even open it up a little bit to see what he wants, that big old devil will kick that door open, and then you've lost.
Another question is, just because we are poor and it is difficult to move upward in social mobility, does that give us the right to take another life if you believe it will be profitable to you?
Yeah, well, that's the elite's point of view. Sometimes they believe it, because the elite don't want to pay high taxes to support the poor. And it's this is what we hear from CAPRI. These are elitists, the people who fund them, the Canadian government, the people in the European Union who fund them are rich nations. They're rich people. They live in big houses. They drive expensive cars with chauffeurs, and they don't want to pay for the poor. They don't want to pay for the poor to be even born, so they can keep more of the money. And so we see a very elitist attitude here where the rich people are saying to the poor, stop having children. And I believe that this is extremely corrupt. If the poor were helped by the rich to have better schooling, to have better health care, if the rich are more generous with their vast resources, like, what is it, 10% of the peoples in the world own 90% of the wealth? If the rich would share more freely of their abundance, then they would find these problems would begin to reduce, especially crime and poverty.
Okay, I'm going to ask Dr. Clacken to tell us what are our viewers saying. Brittany?
Yes, I'm here.
Yes.
Our viewers are talking about the sanctity of life. Great point regarding the steps to the degradation of the sanctity of life. For example, handicapped children. So that's one comment. Another comment I would like to, a question I would like to ask, what would be the benefit to those conducting the studies to present information that is not truthful? What benefit is there of presenting falsified or exaggerated information?
Well, the benefit is that if you look at what we call the culture of death and the culture of life, the culture of death, the people who push euthanasia, abortion, transgenderism, all of this, always work on emotion, not facts. So they try to scare you. They try to say there's an emergency. And so you're not going to think properly as you rush to get a solution. This is what's happening with COVID in the United States now. This is what happened with, the 9/11 situation in the United States. We went and bombed several different countries. When you have a situation on your hand that's bad, you can't go on emotion. And the worst laws in the world are made by emotional people. So most of the information in that CAPRI report is absolutely correct. Absolutely fine, and it's well backed up with proper documentation. The trouble is, the blackest of lies is when somebody only tells you the truth, but it's only part of the truth. And that's what this report does. It says we can save 1.4 million US dollars if we legalize abortion. That may be true, but if you have only 3 abortions, you lose that much money from economic productivity of those babies who never will be. So they don't look at the other parts. So you have to be careful about this.
Thank you, Dr. Clowes.
Hi, Dr. Clowes. This is Crystal Tomlinson. I am listening to the interpretation that you have made of the CAPRI study, and I'm actually taken aback by how easily we have shifted from some of the data that's in there to kind of criticize the process and the possibility that the data might be unclean, in the sense that you're not sure where some of the data has come from previous researches conducted by WHO or funded by the EU. And on that basis, to then say that you don't trust the quality of data collected here. One of the issues we will continue to have, understanding the rate at which people are seeking abortions in a country where abortions are illegal, is that there carries a stringent criminal weight, life in prison. So you will not have a true count of how many persons are actually seeking abortions in a country where it is criminal to be seeking it. So it is not that there is a conspiracy to defraud the public by giving us false information. In fact, in their presentation, CAPRI handled that up front by giving us a range. They said between, if I'm not mistaken, 5,000 and 22,000. And the difficulty of zoning in on a precise figure is because it is illegal and people are not comfortable giving you information, one. And two, the stigma that surrounds this entire exercise makes it that less likely that somebody will be honest with you about why they were at the Victoria Jubilee Hospital overnight, about why they are using a sanitary napkin for 3, 4, 5 days and it's not their cycle. You're not going to get truth from people who we have criminalized, right? So I don't believe it is a conspiracy to trick me into thinking that X number of persons are having unsafe abortions, nor is it an attempt to trick the public as we have this discussion on abortion. But what I think is so important is for both sides in this discussion to come to the table without casting aspersions as to the reason why the other party is taking the position they are taking. I will not say that religious groups have a conspiracy to create theocracies across the world. I'm not going to say that. I live in a democracy, and it means civil society is thriving and should thrive with all aspects and areas of society being allowed to share a perspective and share the reason for their perspective, and for us to come to the table with a sense of trust. And I get the sense here that there is underlying distrust from your end. I could be wrong, but underlying distrust, which means anybody who is a pro-abortionist is not going to be heard by you as having a legitimate concern. And that makes me uncomfortable, because I'm a debater naturally, and I'm eager to hear opposing positions at all times to see what I can learn. But I come to an opposing speaker with an eagerness to hear their perspective, devoid of impugning any kind of motive to that speech. And I've heard throughout the presentation that kind of narrative, that it's a conspiracy, and it's that fun, that, you know, you've seen this and you've seen that, and it won't allow for honest conversation. I will say that up front, and I'm here for an honest conversation.
Okay.
One of
the things I found that we have not treated with at this point, and perhaps it will be treated with later in the session, is that question of the 10%. So you presented data to suggest that 90% of people who seek abortions do so because they're looking for a social abortion, and only 10% want an abortion for hard reasons. That 10% who you consider to have a hard reason, why should they not be able to access a safe abortion? Since we agree that their reason is a hard one, they have been raped and they do not want to spend 9 months carrying the baby of their rapist. What possible reason could you give that person who is now seeking an unsafe abortion?
Can I answer some of the several questions here?
Well, I really only have one question. The first part was an observation.
I want to answer the 7 questions you've already had, if
No,
that's all right.
I only have one question. The earlier points were just observations. So if you'd allow me to finish the one question, what is it that makes the 10% who you deem as having hard reasons for an abortion, what makes them unqualified to take a decision to terminate the pregnancy of a child they do not want in their body?
All right.
That 10% not have the child.
Well, I'll start at the beginning here of all these questions. I have not used the word conspiracy unless I'm very much off base. This is not a conspiracy. It's just a natural thing. And I didn't say there are false statistics in the CAPRI report, except for possibly the 22,000 figure. As I said just before you came on, that the statistics and the documentation are good. The problem is they just don't give enough information, like the other side of the economic question. Now, you mentioned life in prison. I'm not sure that's much of a deterrent in Jamaica, because when was the last time anybody got sent to prison for life in Jamaica? I've never read about such a thing. And you talk about you live in a democracy. If you look at the CAPRI report, they want the abortion vote in Parliament to be held in secret. That's not democratic, that's fascist. They want to keep everything secret, and they don't want the people to participate. You talk about the 10% hard cases. I did not make up that number. This is from a pro-choice or pro-abortion organization itself in the United States, which has done studies all over the world. This is the Ellen Guttmacher Institute, and they found that about 4 to 5% are for these hard cases. And so answering the question on why should women not have access to abortion for the 5%, I will ask you if you think women should have abortion access for the 95%, the 90 to 95%. Birth control failed, economic reasons, social reasons, and so on. But to answer your question about the 5%, does an abortion unrape a woman? Is that the way to deal with the situation? We found in the United States and the pro-choice organizations do not support women who've been raped or who have been the victim of incest. Instead, they abort them and send them back to their molesters. And they tell these women that now your problem is solved. Do we kill a child who's handicapped? Is that love? Do we have a child who's handicapped and we kill them? My own third son, Paul, and his wife, Gina, had a baby who had left heart hypoplastic syndrome. She was going to die soon after birth, and the doctors urged them to have an abortion. But instead, my brave son and his wife had that baby, little baby, and she only lasted for 2 hours before she died. But during those 2 hours, all she knew was the love of her parents, Phoebe Leilani. That's the way you do things in a human way. You don't chop that baby up with the knives of the abortionist. A lot of these women can be helped. You don't have to kill handicapped babies. You don't have to kill the baby of a rapist, because that baby is completely innocent. So I hope that answers at least part of your question.
Thank you, Mr. Clowes. I'm going to
Yes, there are other people.
I'm actually leaving, so I'm saying thank you to Ms. Buckland for inviting me to participate. And I do hope you all continue to have a good afternoon.
Yeah, I hope I can come down and visit you in Jamaica sometime. We can have a nice chat. I'll treat for
soon as
lunch.
our COVID management system is back up and running, I hope we'll be able to receive guests as well.
We might both
right.
be old, but we'll do
Thank
it.
you so much for coming, Ms. Tomlinson. It was a pleasure.
Okay, I just want to mention that Dr. Doreen West had a question. Should we legalize the killing of babies in order to get accurate information?
I don't think that's the really good way to get accurate information. I'd rather use books and the internet myself. But even when you kill the babies, there's really not accurate information, because even in the United States, where we've had legalized abortion for nearly 50 years, there are many illegal abortions because people just don't want to go through the hassle of going to a clinic. So this is a very stigma-induced, a very stigma-saturated act, as it should be. It's very unnatural and murderous, so we're never going to have accurate information.
Okay, good evening, everyone.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Yes, my name is Jamit Borrell, G2K Deputy General Secretary. I have just a few questions. But before I begin asking my questions, the views expressed are solely mine and not necessarily of the organization. My first question was basically based on the entire presentation. So some statistics were quoted, and I just wanted to question how correct they are. So one of the things that I noted was that the presenter said that approximately, well, of the 22,000 babies that were killed last year, they approximate that these babies would have contributed to 45% productivity in terms of in the economy. First question, how did we come by that number? Or how did we quantify that number? Two, how can we guarantee that these babies would have contributed to productivity in the economy per se? How are we sure that these persons wouldn't have grown up to be menaces of society? That's one of my first questions. Also, you stated some statistics which pointed to the fact that the lesser percent of persons really do abortions for medical reasons, right? Was there a study that was conducted in Jamaica to say that during pregnancy, Jamaican women are not predisposed to certain conditions that would make them want to abort a child? Additionally, that's my second question. I had another question. Well, not really a question. I'll skip that one. In terms of where sometimes we're arguing abortion from a religious point of view, how do you discuss such a topic with persons who are socialized differently? In a country such as Nepal, that doesn't have strict abortion laws, where the religion that is practiced is not necessarily Christianity, how do you have this discussion with them if you're coming from only a God perspective? I am of the Christian faith. However, we have to accept that not all persons are of the faith. And this is by not because they don't believe in a God. This is just by virtue of socialization. If we were from India, we probably would have been an Hindu or a Muslim. So that's something that we also need to take into consideration. What I did not agree with was a statement that said that rich people need to share their wealth in order to eradicate poverty. Not coming from a selfish perspective, however, persons who have worked hard to ascertain a certain level of wealth or a certain amount of money, how do we dictate to them that they should share this wealth when all of us were given 24 hours in the day? I know that some persons would have faced different circumstances along the way, but it is still inexcusable for your success. And the last comment I have is in regards to the CAPRI report. It's 72 pages, so I did not review all of it, but what I noted was that they were suggesting that minors should be able to do abortions without parental consent. I disagree wholeheartedly with that statement, because one of the things that we will find is that if minors are allowed to do abortions without parental consent, it opens a can of worms. some of these minors would be persons who are being sex trafficked, persons who are being abused, and then the relative takes them to the clinic to do an abortion. So I don't agree with it for that reason. However, what I would propose is that in the country, in Jamaica, we have government approved abortion centers where we ensure that the persons who are coming in for these abortions do have parental consent, and the doctors who are working there are willing and able to provide the best quality of care for these individuals, instead of legalizing abortion and then some doctors who don't have as much experience in the field, or some doctors whose moral compass may be compromised would just conduct an abortion for money when they say, hey, this fetus is past the maximum time for which an abortion can be carried out. So that is my recommendation. And I think those were my comments. There's a question in the chat that was posed to everyone that said, should we legalize the killing of babies in order to get accurate information? That is not, I don't believe that is what Ms. Tomlinson was suggesting. She was merely pointing out to the fact that we cannot have accurate information if the issue of abortion, or if abortion is so illegal in Jamaica, you'll never have accurate information. So she was merely questioning the accuracy of information and not necessarily saying legalize the killing of babies. And I think we are sensationalizing the killing of babies for our own agenda to make it seem as though this is something that persons do. Like some persons will do an abortion after 4 weeks, and then that's a whole different discussion of science, or if this group of cells is a baby, a full-on baby, or is it just a group of cells. So those are my few comments, and I thank you for having me. G2K is actually having an event that I actually need to attend today.
Okay, thank you very much, Jimmy.
To bring up a point, I'm glad you mentioned about science.
All right, can I say a few words? I'll try to make it quick.
Go ahead, Dr. Clowes.
Okay, to begin with, some folks object to the religious approach. I would say that I don't do that. And if you listened carefully to my presentation, you would not hear anything religious whatsoever. It's all scientific. So I come from the scientific point of view. I've been doing this for 41 years now, and I've learned the lesson that the young lady spoke about. You may have non-religious people, and I've spoken to Muslims and Hindus. I've spoken to atheists and agnostics, Christians, Zoroastrians, A to Z, all around the world with these presentations. They're always scientific. Now, as far as the people who are sharing their wealth, I'm not, the people who are middle class, who have worked hard to earn what they have, I'm not really talking about them. I'm talking about the 10 or 12 men in this world who hold about 15% of the wealth. Bill Gates is worth $130 billion. We have Warren Buffett. We have Jeff Bezos, who just broke $250 billion. And I imagine that Jeff Bezos or Gates or any of those other people don't work much harder than the rest of us here. I'm just saying that the gigantic amount of mountains of money accumulated by these men should be spread out a little bit more. And just imagine that one of them could turn the entire island of Jamaica into a first world nation with the money they have. I did that calculation sometime. Just one man could convert Jamaica into kind of a city state, almost like Singapore. So that's a tremendous inequality in wealth there. Now, there may be some people predisposed to abort in the island of Jamaica, but this is not what the Alan Guttmacher Institute has found out. With very little variation, even between rich and poor nations, the reasons for abortion tend to be remarkably similar. So most of their studies were done in Trinidad and Tobago, in Puerto Rico and Cuba, and they found that they're very similar to the United States. So this is one of those things where there's not a Jamaican experience or a Canadian experience. It all turns out to be approximately the same. And what I'd like to say once again, I'd like to keep in your mind that this report was funded by the European Union, and we have the Canadians who founded and who fund this CAPRI organization. You have to ask yourself, what really is their agenda really? Because this group in Ottawa, Canada, called the International Development Research Center, has as its primary mission the promotion of sexual and reproductive health and rights around the world. And as we all know by now, that means abortion. So start asking questions. The CAPRI report has good statistics in it. They just don't give you the complete picture. And that's what I'm saying you should watch out for.
Thank you, Dr. Clowes. I just want the audience to know that we will be discussing further on the medical perspective next Wednesday, March 3 at 5:30 p.m. And we have a former abortion doctor to speak with us, and hope everyone can make it. Now, I'm going to share the screen because I'm going to bring on a pre-recorded speaker that could not make it today. She is Miss Centafonte, and she will be dealing with the topic of reducing social ills and the protection of women. And I'm going to be sharing the screen on that at this time. Sarah, where is that?
Sorry, can anyone hear me? Everyone hear me?
Where is that, Sarah? Okay, I'm going to share the screen. Sarah, come here for me. All right. So when I click on this, when I click on that, see.
Right. To share with us today, we have a special guest with us, Miss Alison Centafonte from Live Action. She is the External Affairs Director at Live Action, which is a US-based organization. Thank you for joining us, Miss Alison, Miss Centafonte.
Thank you so much for having me.
No problem. Before we go into our topic today, could you just share with us a bit about your area of expertise and a little about the background of the organization on the topic of abortion?
Live Action is a leading global human rights organization dedicated to educating on abortion and the abortion industry. We are the largest pro-life nonprofit online in the United States with a following of over 6 million people and growing every day. We were founded and are led by Lila Rose, an amazing woman who has bravely gone undercover into our nation's abortion industry facilities to expose the way they treat and talk to pregnant women, to coerce and convince towards abortion, often breaking laws in order to procure the funds for that abortion. We build out a global digital network where we are sharing every day messages, videos, content, posts, speeches on abortion, and we're seeing hearts and minds being changed every day. We've had the opportunity to speak before international institutions like your own and others to help guide them as they think through this big question of what it means to be an empowered woman and an empowered society. And we always encourage that abortion be rejected as the answer to any societal ill, whether that is poverty, lack of education, or elsewhere. We know and we advocate that life is an innate right, and no other right can be achieved without that first right to life.
Right. Very, very interesting. And I'm very happy that you mentioned about poverty, because a recent development has been going on in our country. There was a report that a research group at our University of the West Indies, Mona, had published that was recommending abortion on demand and including access to minors without parental consent. And this recommendation was supposedly based on the premise that abortion is a right, a human right, a civil right, and it should be afforded to women for them not to be marginalized. But seeing the work of your organization, I have seen that you mentioned that you've gone undercover at these institutions and have found that, you know, abortion actually does more to discriminate against women than actually help women. Could you go into some of the work that your organization has done and found that's where legalizing abortion actually opens the floodgates for more civil, more social ills?
Absolutely. First, we need to define the terms. It's incredibly important that anyone considering the question of abortion knows what an abortion is. In our work at Live Action, we have made this incredibly easy to discover and educate yourself on. We have gone and taken the opportunity to partner with former abortionists, former abortion doctors who have performed thousands of abortions to tell us what the procedure is like. And we've actually created a series of videos that can be found at abortionprocedures.com to see what a first, second, and third trimester abortion is. The reason this is incredibly important is because we are seeing that a majority of politicians and leaders who are speaking into this do not know themselves what an abortion is. That's incredibly dangerous for us to have any kind of conversation without knowing what we're talking about. First, second, third trimester abortions will either dismember a preborn child, starve them of nutrition, behead them, and the tools that are used for these abortions are gruesome. Now, the videos themselves are a medical animation. They are not gory, they are not bloody, but I encourage for everyone considering this question to know and be educated enough to speak about what an abortion is. Otherwise, you are uneducated and unable, I think, to have an educated opinion in this conversation. You must first know. So again, that website is abortionprocedures.com. You can see this within 10 minutes, what these 3 procedures entail. So that's my first point. I think that's incredibly important. Education is key, and in requiring any legislator who is considering a vote on abortion and abortion so-called rights to know what that is that they are voting for.
Exactly. So very, very, very good point. I wanted you to go into more about the social implications of legalizing abortions, including sex-selective abortions, you know, forced abortions, and the link to underground sex trafficking. Great. I know that's a lot, but in the limited time that we have, but yes, just
wonderful. So we at Live Action and the pro-life movement in the United States always are talking about how abortion is a human rights abuse in and of itself because it ends the life of a human. But what you're pointing out is that it often leads to other human rights abuses. The way we treat the most innocent leads us to treat others in an equally horrific way. So let's walk through 3 key points. One will be our work uncovering sex-selective abortion.
Over 100 million girls are missing today. These girls were victims of female gendercide, the targeting of females for extermination through infanticide, and most often the aborting of preborn girls just because they are girls. The Economist reports, the destruction is worst in China but has spread far beyond. Even sections of America's population have distorted sex ratios. Gendercide exists on almost every continent. If experts are right and gendercide is taking place in our own backyard, what is being done to protect our girls from the most brutal form of discrimination, violent sex-selective abortion? In April 2012, Live Action investigated abortion clinics nationwide to discover what would happen when the clinic receives a blatant request for a sex-selective abortion of a baby girl. In the footage you are about to see, Live Action went undercover at Planned Parenthood in Austin, Texas.
Have a seat here. So, yes, you're pregnant.
Okay, that's what I thought, yeah.
And so, what are you leaning more towards? I see that you say that you want to terminate if it's a girl, so are you just wanting to continue the pregnancy in the meantime, or what?
Yeah, I think that would be the plan.
Just proof of pregnancy.
Oh, good, thank you. So then I'd want to schedule.
Sex-selective abortion, for those who aren't aware, is aborting a child based off of their sex, their gender, whether they are male or female in utero. Legalized abortion has led to the loss of human life, particularly female human life, in a large scale. In the United States and across the world, sex-selective abortion is legal because women are seen in many societies as less valuable than men. In other countries, sex-selective abortion has led to the loss of over 1.2 million girls, particularly. The United Nations reports that sex-selective abortions kill 1.2 million girls every year in utero. In India, for example, 60 million girls are lost in just the last decade to the widespread use of this practice. 21 million girls are unwanted by their family in just that country. And that's according to the 2018 economic survey that the Indian government themselves issued. This is a striking human rights abuse against women, particularly in a conversation that claims to be focused on women's empowerment, right? Yeah, exactly. It is the ultimate in oppression of women to be able to kill a woman in utero simply for being a female. That is the reality we're seeing, not just in India and China, but in the United States as well. In third world countries that legalize abortion, sex-selective abortion is the next step. Every girl, that should cause fear in their hearts, because we are often throughout history seen as less valuable than men, so it targets us specifically. Live Action actually did an investigation into the abortion industry. There are only a few states in the United States that outlaw sex-selective abortion, meaning they have laws on the books that say you cannot terminate a child based off of their sex. We went in undercover with our field investigators with a camera and audio to see if these industry leaders in these states where it is illegal were willing to break the law in order to procure an abortion. And our investigation exposed that it's alive and well, even in states that outlaw it. Gendercide is what we're calling it. Gendercide, sex-selective abortion, targeting little girls. We went into these states and on camera documented abortion industry workers willing to allow a woman to continue a termination of her pregnancy and abortion because of the sex of the baby, even though they knew that that was against the law. There is absolutely a link in legalized abortion and the advancement of sex-selective abortion. Because if you legalize abortion in a society, you say that you, as the grown-up in the room, have a right to terminate your child based off of a litany of reasons: convenience, sex, race, things that we as a society would call discrimination, right? We work so hard as women to make sure that we have equal opportunity in education, in housing, in law. But we should never be told that we must kill our child, particularly our female children, in order to thrive as a society. That is the ultimate in oppression. That is not advancement in any way.
Yeah, one thing I was just thinking about linking it to our country, because we're a small island state, and you know, the impact on the population right now, our population is a little below the replacement ratio. And so if we were to go that route, I would think of so many different secondary implications of having, you know, our female population being declining, even worse, you know, a lot of economic strains, a lot of different things that, you know, we can't necessarily go into in detail, but, you know, we can, you know, put the resources up if you have.
That's a great point. I mean, anyone interested in that economic angle as well can go and look at what other countries are experiencing in terms of demographic winters. So it's called a demographic winter, as you know, when you do not create enough in your population to replace and advance your society. So it does create economic strain as well when you legalize abortion and you essentially eradicate the next generation that you're counting on to support your aging society, your aging demographics. So that's a demographic winter, and you can see that online if you take a look at some other countries and what they're doing. And now, ironically enough, they are incentivizing in certain countries conception weekends in order to incentivize people to conceive, because their economies need that continued growth and advancement of the family, and they're up against an abortion industry that's actually eradicating those very families.
All right. If you could touch a little on the point of forced abortions being more prevalent after it being legalized, and if there's any link with underground sex trafficking as well.
Absolutely. Well, let's talk about the idea that legal abortions would decrease back alley abortions. Some think that abortion is necessary in order to protect women from the danger of an illegal abortion, or what has been termed a back alley abortion. Historically speaking, though, we at Live Action have looked at the statistics around this, the deaths that have taken place, whether abortion is legalized or illegal in our country, the United States, and elsewhere. So I'm just going to touch on a couple key points. One, you should feel confident in fighting abortion and making abortion illegal to take care of women and children. In fact, as abortion is legalized in a society, more children are killed, we know that, and more women are hurt. For example, from the 1940s to the 1970s, deaths of women due to abortion rapidly declined because of better medicine and increased use of antibiotics, not because abortion was made legal. This widespread belief that tens of thousands of women were dying from illegal back alley abortions was a lie propagated by two individuals in the United States. Their names were Larry Lader and Bernard Nathanson, both of NARAL, the National Abortion Rights Action League. Bernard Nathanson, when he converted from being an abortionist to a pro-life advocate, he admitted, saying, quote, "When we spoke of deaths due to illegal abortion, it was always 5 to 10,000 per year. I confess I knew the figures were totally false." Bernard Nathanson, the leaders of the movement, have continued this lie. They've admitted it was a lie. They would make up numbers of deaths due to illegal abortion to scare women and society into legalizing this human rights abuse.
That's very insightful. Just wanted to point out, because the report that we are basically trying to analyze and see how true the numbers are. They have used estimates based on not reality, but on these studies that the authors themselves have actually said, no, we were actually lying. We were trying to inflate the numbers to put towards a point, but no, I mean, people are still using this, but thank you for bringing this up. So you can go ahead.
Yeah, I will say too, that beyond their own admissions, you look at the numbers. In 1972, the year before Roe v. Wade, which in the United States is the Supreme Court case that legalized abortion for us, in the year before abortion was legalized, 39 women sadly died from illegal abortion, and 24 women died from legal abortion. At the time, it was called therapeutic abortion. In 1973, the year of Roe v. Wade, 19 women died from illegal abortion, meaning less women died from illegal abortion, and 25 women died from legal, which means the death rate went up for deaths from legal abortions. So in the year that abortion was nationally legalized in the United States, more women died from legal abortion than illegal abortion. We cannot accept the lie from the other side that says women are safer. People like Tanya Reeves and Cree Irwin are two women, for example, that did die from legal abortions in places like Planned Parenthood here in the United States. Their lives matter. These lives, as you are aware, are often of color, minority, lower socioeconomic status. Their deaths are sometimes even hidden from the news and others because of that, because they're so scared that it would reveal how cruel the industry is. And so I will say those names again: Tanya Reeves, Cree Irwin. They are calling out to us to end legalized abortion, it's what caused their own deaths. And so there is death to be concerned about, but also abortion poses long-term physical and emotional harms for women, including a risk of suicide. We know suicide and depression, alcohol rates are up after an abortion. Future infertility is a very big harm for women. And pregnancy loss and damage to her internal organs are very real risks of abortion as well that are often under shared and underreported.
Right, we'll be going further into psychological impacts in another session, but I'm very grateful that you brought them up. Is there a link to underground sex trafficking? I saw something on your website where you have your organization has done work on this firsthand experience to see, the types of, things social ills actually are propagated from legalizing abortions. Could you just expound a little bit on it before we close?
Yeah, so let's talk about the link between legal abortions and sex trafficking. America and the world is calling for an end to sexual abuse at every level, including at every institution. That is good. But we have to realize what part of that industry looks like. We created at Live Action a 7-part docuseries and an investigative report documenting the systemic cover-up of sexual abuse and rape at our largest abortion chain, Planned Parenthood. We went undercover. We found documentation of Planned Parenthood and the abortion industry often failing to report suspected abuse and rape, even of minors, in order to procure the money that comes from an abortion. One thing that we can't forget here is that the abortion industry makes money off of abortion. They're a for-profit. They make millions every year. They have a huge pot of money because of their abortion services. The pro-life movement does not. The pro-life movement does not make money off of this. In fact, we often give out of our own kindness to help women in unplanned pregnancies. So any politician, any leader, any citizen should follow the money and ask why there's such a push for legalized abortion. Now, you would think that a medical professional would be smart enough or concerned enough to report suspected abuse. But we can't always guess. We can't always assume that when money is involved, right? So there are laws in the United States that ensure medical professionals report suspected abuse. You don't have to prove it, just suspected abuse, bruises, the things that are shared with you. So even though by law they are required to report these abuses, we've seen that Planned Parenthood and the abortion industry have ignored victims' pleas for help. We document stories of victims who said, I told them that my abuser was in the car and they sent me back to that abuser. Their negligence is very clear, not even just from our own documentation, but there are reports, like a report out of Loyola University in Chicago, that documented sex trafficking survivors, these very women who survived the industry. They asked them in a litany of interviews, where were you taken for medical care? These sex trafficking survivors reported that they were taken by their abusers to Planned Parenthood as the most often visited provider, only second to the emergency room.
Wow.
And when asked why, survivors said, quote, because they don't ask any questions. That is a huge problem. If Planned Parenthood was potentially a point of intervention for these sex trafficking victims, they may have been the only person that could have helped them out. And instead of caring for these girls, the industry is more inclined to cover it up and fail to report because there are things like abortion quotas and there's money on the line. We've documented as part of our aiding abusers investigation, former workers that have said, yeah, sometimes we would laugh, like, we're not reporting a 14-year-old that came in with a 31-year-old boyfriend. That's not our business, when in fact it is their business because they are offering an abortion service to a young girl who is in clearly what's a non-consensual, cannot be consensual relationship. It's statutory rape on it right there in front of them. So we have recorded cases, documentation, former workers discussing how this was common practice. There is absolutely a link between sex trafficking continuing and abortion. And I'll put it this way. Think about how abortion allows the worst of men to cover up the sexual evidence of their crimes, right? Abortion allows the worst of men to take their victims to one place and eradicate the evidence of their crime against this woman. And it breaks our hearts, and we need to end sex trafficking. And part of that will be exposing the link in the abortion industry and the way that idea of sex without cost for any reason, we ask no questions, is hurting women, and it's actually hurting our ability to bring justice to the worst of men in society.
Oh, you've said a mouthful. Yeah, so you know, it has really opened my eyes to more details as to, you know, the secondary implications that legalizing abortion can really have. You know, from your personal experience, I just want you to give a word of advice to the Caribbean leaders on, you know, the steps forward as they, you know, contemplate having a conscience vote on this issue of abortion.
I will say this in closing, and thank you for an opportunity to share my heart on this and our nation's experience with fighting the abortion industry. I know you, legislator, are up against a lot of big, loud voices right now. I know that you're up against a lot of big money and races and campaigns right now. But I want you to hear the still small voice. I want you to hear the small voice of an innocent preborn child who is asking for one thing: an equal chance at life. They have done nothing wrong, no matter the way they were conceived. And our laws should support and protect that still small voice that you and I were one day, and now are grown and taking action. And that still small voice should drive you. What unites us is our humanity. Our founder and president, Lila Rose, said this at the United Nations, and I'll repeat it to you. To be human is enough. To be human is enough to secure a place of respect and protection in any society. Our equal dignity as humans is what we share. And as we struggle to ensure that women are treated with equal dignity and fairness and advanced in places, particularly that they are threatened, we must not make the mistake, as we try to achieve protection in our own advancement, of relegating a whole other people group, those that are weaker than us, our children, that we don't leave them behind. But instead, we embrace a vision together where we can do better than abortion, that women deserve better than abortion, and that our children are not a threat, but a gift, and actually are the advancement that we need as a society. If we don't treat the weakest members of our society with the respect that we have for ourselves, how is that justice? How is that equality? How is that upholding human rights? I encourage you to uphold human rights. That is a human at the moment of conception, and they deserve our complete legal and societal protection. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ms. Centafonte. Yes, Centafonte. Thank you so much for your, you know, passionate and emotive speech. And we definitely have a lot to think about here in the Caribbean, and we ask for your continued prayers and continue to do the good work that you do, and God bless.
We are fighting with you. Thank you for shining a light on this, and we are praying. We are praying for great success. Thank you.
Appreciate it very much. God bless you.
Have a good day. Thank you.
Thanks as well. Right, to share with us today, we have a special guest.
So everyone is hearing me, right? I'm audible?
No, you're not audible. Sorry, let me go ahead. Okay, we thank Ms. Centafonte for her very passionate response in dealing with her topic, abortion as discrimination against women. She mentioned many points, including that with legalizing abortion, clinics allow parents to kill their children based on their gender. The statistics show that baby girls are more likely to be aborted than boys. She also mentioned an important point, which we must consider in the Jamaican context regarding sex trafficking, that the abortion industry is not concerned about bringing these rapists or these human traffickers to justice. What they want is to abort the baby in order to get money. It's all about money. Now, we have with us Dr. Miller. You know, Dr. Miller, I think of the woman who has experienced the horrors of sexual abuse. Then her only hope of receiving justice from the judicial system is taken away from her. All the DNA evidence and further wounds are inflicted, enabled by legal abortions. I also think of other than sex selection. Legalizing abortion would enable discrimination against the disabled. From a bioethics perspective, what kind of social implications would this have for a developing society like Jamaica?
Well, thank you for those questions, and thank you for the opportunity to contribute today. I'm no substitute for Alison, but I'll try my best to answer them as well as I can. Let me take the question about disability first. This is something that we can answer quite well from a UK perspective, where I'm from. I actually do have disabilities myself, and in a sense I was lucky that these were not diagnosable before birth, because if they were, the chances are it would be that I would be terminated before my birth, and I wouldn't be here today. I wouldn't have a medical degree, I wouldn't be researching at Oxford or anything. I would have been not given the chance to live, because that's the reality of the fate of most disabled children who have their disabilities diagnosed in the womb in the UK. We estimate between 70 to 90% of children with Down syndrome are aborted each year in the UK. And in other countries in Europe, it's actually even worse than that. So Iceland a few years ago boasted about eradicating Down syndrome, by which they didn't mean that they had treated all the complications that can arise from Down syndrome, which is a good thing when those complications cause difficulty and disability. What they actually meant was they had eliminated every single child with Down syndrome before birth. And if we thought about the same situation occurring to women, if we had those similar sorts of abortion rates for women, we would be outraged about the discrimination and about the impact that this had on women in society as a whole. We would say that women had their presence eliminated from society, they had their voice eliminated from society, and they had their dignity eliminated from society. And that's exactly what we've seen in the UK, where it's possible to abort for disability up until the moment of birth. And we do know that children with Down syndrome are aborted as late as 32, 33, 34 weeks, and even later in the United Kingdom. So it's had a profound effect on the disability community in the United Kingdom. And that's why actually we're beginning to see the tide turning. A young lady with Down syndrome has decided to sue the UK government because of this discriminatory law. And we're hoping that this law will be overturned after 50 years because of her brave legal challenge. Disability selective abortion has been condemned by even the United Nations Committee on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities. And anyone who's familiar with the United Nations knows that their their organizations and their agencies and their committees are all very, very in favor of abortion. But in this case, even they have conceded that this is a clear violation of human rights. This is clear discrimination. So abortion, a legal framework for abortion opens the door to massive and radical disability against disabled people and against women. And that's why, as someone who's been working as a doctor in the UK, I feel so passionate about speaking out about this, is because it really is a phenomenon which doesn't just affect babies in the womb, but also has ripple effects across all of society, which particularly target the most vulnerable and marginalized people in society. And as someone who has always been very, very passionate about social justice, that's something that has stuck with me and has really encouraged me to speak about this and research on this.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Miller. I'm going to be checking social media now. We expect that after this, our audience must have some questions on the issue for our panelists, especially Dr. Miller, who is the present speaker. Dr. Clacken, what are our viewers saying at this time?
Okay, our viewers are very concerned that Planned Parenthood was the second most visited place after the emergency room for abortions. Is there any legal recourse? I know that Planned Parenthood gets a lot of money from the government, but what happens to them when these women present to the emergency room? When abortions go wrong, when it's obvious that women are being trafficked, is there any kind of investigation that occurs?
Yeah, great question. Thank you for that. I can't say a great deal specifically about Planned Parenthood. Planned Parenthood has a fairly minimal presence in the United Kingdom. They have their international arm, International Planned Parenthood Federation, is based in the UK, but domestically they don't have much of a presence and don't do many abortions, if any at all. What I can say is that we have a lot of information now about safeguarding and about the complications of abortion. Some of the mental health complications of abortion are very, very clear, particularly suicidal behavior and anxiety. Those have been confirmed in very good studies published by pro-abortion authors, and they shouldn't really be in dispute. That's not the kind of thing that typically, well, actually they can, even those can send people to the emergency room, but the connection between those and the abortion is often not seen by doctors and not recorded by doctors. And so that makes it a bit more difficult to follow up. In terms of the physical complications, we know that abortion is associated with preterm birth, and this causes huge health problems and huge economic costs for those babies who were born very, very early. And these are very long-term chronic conditions that result from preterm birth and cause immense cost and burdens for the families and for the children themselves. But in terms of the direct complications, one of the reasons we don't have great information on this is because abortion providers have generally very firmly resisted any sort of link between the record of a woman having an abortion and a woman's later health problems. And not wanting to be too cynical, I think part of the reason for this is because they know that there are complications of abortion, and if the records are kept very clearly, that will become more evident. And one of the reasons I say this is because Scandinavia does actually keep very good documentation of abortions and the complications that result from it. And in Scandinavia, they frequently found particularly high complication rates from abortion compared to other countries that don't keep good records. And so they found in Finland, in particular, for example, that medical abortion or abortion by pill or by drug is actually associated with significantly more medical complications. About 6% of women having a medical abortion by pill end up needing surgery to prevent any infection or to stop the hemorrhage as a result. And we know that there are significant rates of hemorrhage and infection in women undergoing medical abortions as well. I don't want to scaremonger and I don't want to exaggerate. So the majority of women don't have any direct physical complications other than the normal pains, quite heavy bleeding, and so on. But nevertheless, this is a very significant minority of women, and those women matter very, very much. And given that the numbers are often downplayed, I think it's important to be clear that there really is a significant number of women who have direct physical complications from abortion, not to mention all the long-term complications like preterm birth, suicidal risks, and anxiety.
Thank you so much, Dr. Miller. I noticed that you mentioned a study out of Finland. Finland has been notorious for keeping very good records because, as you mentioned, abortion has been legal in Finland for quite some time. And they have reported higher rates of suicide among women who obtain abortions versus women who don't. I know this is the social and economic ramifications of abortion, but could you just help our viewers to understand what some of the costs involved, what are some of the costs involved for a woman who might be depressed, who might be suicidal, who might be feeling guilt after obtaining an abortion, whether legal or illegal? A woman who has attempted suicide on multiple occasions, what kind of economic costs does that does that create in a society? Thinking of time lost from work, thinking of, you know, her spending money to get counseling. Can you help us to understand a bit about that?
Sure, I can try. So yeah, as you mentioned, the studies from Finland also show very clearly a massively increased risk of suicide after abortion compared to continuing a pregnancy. So the risk of suicide is about 6 to 7 times as much if you have an abortion compared to if you continue a pregnancy. And because suicide is the leading cause of maternal death in many developed countries, what this means is that this has a huge contribution to maternal mortality rates. So actually, the studies in Finland have shown that not only the risk of suicide, but the risk of dying within a year of an abortion is triple the risk of dying within a year after a pregnancy. And that's something that's often not appreciated. Of course, the main cost when we think about suicide is not the economic cost, but it's about the loss of life, because this is tragic. And I'm sure probably all of us have some familiarity, whether a friend or a family member, or maybe one relation removed. All of us will have some familiarity with suicide and the devastating impact it has on a family. I can't say very much about the economic costs. Obviously, we know that mental disorder does have huge economic costs and growing economic costs, particularly in the West. I can't comment on details of that, but actually I'd want to reinforce that ultimately this is not an economic question. We know that abortion does have economic costs. It's been estimated that the cost of preterm birth, for example, from abortion is around $1.2 billion in the US each year. As far as I know, the economic costs of mental health have not been quantified in the same way. But actually, I think we all know that, you know, in a way, this goes far beyond economics. This is about not only the loss of an unborn baby's life, but the loss of deeply valuable and infinitely worthy women's lives as well. And that's something that we as a doctor can't put a price on.
Thank you so much, Dr. Miller, for helping us to understand that. Back to you, Reverend Buckland.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Clacken. Thank you, Dr. Miller, for your insightful perspective on the bioethics of abortion. I need to make a few apologies at this time. Dr. Alveda King, niece of civil rights activist Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., who was to be one of our speakers, has been trying to get in on our meeting for the longest time, but has not been successful. We hope to have her back. We hope to have her on another program. My daughter also has been experiencing technical difficulties with her microphone and computer, and she had wished that she could be more vocal in the discussion today. Hopefully next time, God willing, she will be able. At this time, I want to make some concluding remarks. And that is, we have had quite a rich discussion today. CAPRI says that we should accept what we cannot change. But if we really care for our vulnerable women, should we not be facilitating them to rise above their circumstances instead of make a decision to inflict further harm and regret? If we want to be a prosperous and healthy society, should we be pushing abortion or investing in improving health and social services to better care for our women and children? We want to thank all our guests here today, Dr. Clowes, Dr. Miller, and Miss Centafonte, who couldn't come today, but she did her recording, as you have seen in the past few minutes, and all the listeners that made time to join us online. Thank you for participating. Thanks also to Ms. Tomlinson and Ms. Burrell. We hope you and other representatives will join us for our future discussions. This discussion is not over. We continue searching next week, Wednesday, March 3 at 5:30 p.m. Jamaica time on the topic, from a medical perspective, how safe are legal abortions? We will also be looking at the question, are safe abortions a myth? Tune in to interact with a former abortion doctor and hear testimonies from someone who survived a saline or saline abortion attempt. At this time, my daughter, Sarah Buckland, is going to be sharing a preview of next week's meeting.
First is a secret parliament vote on legalizing abortion upon request. The second is access for minors to reproductive health services, including abortion without parental consent. And lastly, termination of pregnancy services should be publicly funded to ensure that women who are most economically vulnerable are able to access them.
Thanks again for joining us. We wish you a safe and joyful weekend. We encourage you to choose life. God bless.